Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now in our 32nd episode of 2024. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco and Geha, the platinum sponsors of Five for Breakfast. I'm currently here in Buenos Aires for our third Latin America Fiber Connect event of 2025. The event has been amazing at maximum capacity, and the sessions have been just incredible. Back in the U.S., Congress is in recess, and we'll be back on September 2nd to address the remaining appropriations bill before October 1 to avert a potential government shutdown. Yesterday at Mountain Connect in Denver, NTI Chief of Staff Brooke Dullion stated that 46 states have run and completed their benefit of the bargain round. The final BEAD proposals are due to NTIA on September 4th. When I get back from South America, we'll be heading up to Canada for our next North American Fiber Connect workshop in Toronto on Tuesday, August 19th. After Toronto, we'll be in Spokane in September, Scottsdale in October, Kansas City in November, and then we'll end the year in Palm Springs at our premier member meeting in December 8th and 9th. Today on Five for Breakfast, our guest is Andrew Butcher, the president of the Maine Connectivity Authority, to discuss driving connections, local lessons from the road to broadband expansion. Before I formally introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce David Norris from the team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you to everybody for joining us today. We appreciate it. And before I go into the housekeeping items, we'd like to once again thank our platinum sponsors of Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco and Gaia. Now, as participants, you are in listen-only mode today. To ask a question, please type it into the question box located within the control panel on the side of your screen, and we will host a Q&A session with our panelists today after the presentation. This is being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours. And you can find that recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. Finally, at the conclusion of today's presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. If you could take a moment to do so, we appreciate the input. And with that, I will hand things back over to Gary to get us started. Gary?
Thanks, Dave, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the president and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Fiber Breakfast, our guest was Jim Martin, the CEO of CityNet, to discuss bridging the divide in the Mountain State, CityNet's role in rural broadband expansion. Jim is a really interesting guy, and as he's described himself as being self-employed his entire career, as he's built CityNet into one of the top ISPs in West Virginia. West Virginia is ground zero for, how the BEAD program is going to work out. Kelly Workman, the state broadband director, had delivered to NTIA a final proposal that had 100% fiber, and it was $200 million below budget before going back to the benefit of the bargain round. So we'll see what happens. But Jim discussed public-private partnerships and the models that have worked, and then what's required to get everyone in West Virginia connected with fiber. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to the FBA website and watch the replay. Today on Five for Breakfast, our guest is Andrew Butcher, the president of the Maine Connectivity Authority, to discuss driving connections, local lessons from the road to broadband expansion. So Andrew has served as the inaugural president of the Maine Connectivity Authority since 2021. MCA is Maine's quasi-governmental agency charged with achieving universal access of affordable high-speed broadband throughout the state of Maine. By balancing investments in projects, places, and people, MCA is advancing digital equity for all. As the authority's first employee, Butcher was charged with starting up the agency and scaling capacity to receive and deploy and administer close to $500 million in federal and state funding. Since 2021, Butcher has built a high-performing team, an organization designed to deploy 12 distinct funding programs, delivering over $250 million of activities, resulting in over 100 grants and contracts, utilizing a variety of strategies and technologies effective in bridging Maine's digital divide. Andrew has over 15 years of experience in community and economic development, social entrepreneurship, and connected infrastructure. Prior to his role at MCA, he founded and ran an internationally recognized nonprofit, served as the director of the Maine Broadband Coalition, and helped advance numerous innovations and resilience initiatives in Maine. He lives in Portland with his family, and he's known to his children for repairing the family waffle maker and listen to reggae while making said waffles. Well, I'm almost suddenly getting hungry for some waffles, Andrew. But welcome, Andrew. And for audience, please type in your questions to go. And with that, we will get things started. I'll turn things over to Andrew.
Well, thanks so much, Gary. Pleasure to be here, and I'm glad to be able to bring a little breakfast reference to our session this morning. Also, Gary, thanks so much to you and your team for hosting me at Fiber Connect this year in Nashville. It was a pleasure to join such an incredible event and gathering, and just a tremendous opportunity to learn, commiserate, connect with new people. So it was a pleasure for us to be able to attend. I also want to extend a thanks. I've got a couple team members listening now and likely in the future, but just to the Connectivity Authority team, our network of partners and vendors who are, as we speak, furiously working on execution of our B final proposal amidst a number of other reporting requirements and projects and initiatives. Our team is hard at work right now, allowing for me to have the time and space to do this. So I just appreciate you all so much. Gary, I think one of the things that brings me to chatting with you all, and I'm going to share screen here, and I'm going to walk through a storyboard of a recent trip that I took in my 1984 Westphalia VW van, aptly named Buttercup. For those that are viewing the screen, it's a buttery colored old van. In June, I drove 900 miles around the state to visit a handful of our partners and projects, and to, if nothing else, test a hypothesis that I've been kind of scratching at a little bit. You know, I spend all day, every day with the Maine Connectivity Authority, as you introduced, Maine's quasi-governmental agency responsible for expanding our digital infrastructure so that everyone benefits. I spend all day, every day, trying to make sure people get online. And I spend all night, every night, trying to make sure that my children are not online. I've had a little bit of a fear and a hypothesis that the more connected we are digitally, the more isolated we are from a humanity standpoint. I know I'm not the only one who spends time thinking about this, but I really wanted to, given the last 4 years of progress, take a minute and have as many conversations as possible and try to test that hypothesis. And part of the reason we opted to take this approach with our Driving Connections tour was that, you know, this van, Buttercup, has this uncanny ability to connect with people. And truly, whether it's an old grizzly Harley Davidson rider or a hippy dippy fish festival goer, this van makes people smile. Everywhere I go, people come to me and have a story, or I literally was stopped in a parking lot and someone told me their life dream about living in one of these vans. And so when we're talking about how to facilitate more of a human-to-human connection, Buttercup has been a pretty wonderful bridge builder. So it was a great opportunity to be able to set out and to visit a handful of projects around the state. And so what I want to do is I'm just going to walk through a little bit of the tour with a couple of key stories and perspectives. And this story map is going to be shared with folks online. Please take a look at it. And essentially, our starting point here is just an overview of the tour. What's important with this is it sort of reflects a couple key things. First of all, we've got my route mapped out, but we also see a handful of, well, we see a significant amount of territory with different coloration of areas. And those represent a number of our infrastructure projects that we've helped facilitate with partnerships over the last couple of years. It highlights a red and blue dotted line that looks vaguely like a moose head that reflects the Maine Open Optical Statewide Enabling Network, or MooseNet, our new middle mile initiative that we are underway building right now through a competitive grant with NTIA. in partnership with the Maine Department of Transportation and the University of Maine system. And so this map showcases projects that have been funded, the route I've taken, MooseNet, but it also showcases at a high level that we live in a pretty big state. And for folks that are not really familiar with Maine, we have a population of about 1.4 million people in a state that is 3/4 the size of Pennsylvania. That means there's a lot of space and not a lot of humans. We have very hilly, ragged coastlines. We have hilly mountains. We have granite-laden soil, and a lot of trees in the Pine Tree State. And so it is important when we think about how structure dictates function, and the reality that we also have the highest concentration of rural population in the country, also with one of the oldest, if not the oldest population in the country. So it's important as we look at the map, right? The map is not the territory, but the map does help us understand some of the dynamics that we are working with, and how we have approached our comprehensive connectivity strategy over the last couple of years. So I'm going to just highlight there's no way I'm able to share with you all in the time that we have the breadth of conversations and talking with community partnerships. And in Western Maine, we started the trip taking a look at how a collection of communities and municipalities have come together to invest in not just a public-private partnership, but a range of different connectivity initiatives, whether it's public Wi-Fi at a solar facility, whether it is targeted education training at the local vocational school, whether it is embedding and supporting digital navigators at local recovery centers, building out and deploying capital projects funds to be able to support community anchor institutions, expanding their use in their facility through organizations like the Hope Association. What I want to, as a starting point story, I'm going to spend, Gary, about the next 5 to 8 minutes as I talk through the tour with maybe 3 stories of a specific nature. And I'm sort of landing here in Western Maine with the town of Bethel. And Western Maine, we're talking Oxford County. You see on the map here a number of different infrastructure projects that have been supported with capital projects funds over the course of the last couple of years. And it's important, as we met with the town officials in Bethel, who, this is one of those things that we don't really think about, but Bethel was probably tip of the spear in facilitating a multi-town public-private partnership on the back of a regional effort to educate communities around how to advance broadband development. Over the last probably 7 years, that's been happening. Bethel, small town in Western Maine, had to move out of their town office due to a mold problem. They moved to the airport. At the airport, they realized they had 6 different town facilities in a small town and were paying 3 different internet service providers. In an effort to consolidate their internet costs, they reached out to neighboring communities. Those neighboring communities ultimately ended up partnering together to be able to facilitate a multi-town initiative that allowed for aggregated demand to be able to approach the local internet service providers and facilitate a very competitive process to be able to get best possible response. Ultimately bringing together the regional internet service provider who brought dollar for dollar match to a regional funding initiative that MCA was happy to support in support of what was that multi-town educational initiative. So, I think it is models like this that are so key to success in Maine. When you have a highly rural population, it is a reflection of how engaged and informed citizens really do have the ability to come together and drive demand. And I think that was one of the most important lessons that was refined and sort of put in perspective in Western Maine. You've got key folks that then complement that effort from a digital navigation standpoint. So even in the town of Bethel's library, the image we're looking at here, this is Jim Whitman and we're sitting in the Whitman Library that his great-grandfather founded in Oxford County. And Jim is not only the go-to technical expert, he's also the local school bus driver. So this is a human that is literally a just embodiment of connection and is representing this critical investment of, all right, once we've got infrastructure in place, we also need to be able to help people access and use. And so, it's just a tremendous opportunity to hear from stories from the field. And, the gentleman that he's speaking to is the town administrator in the town of Bethel. And so you look at these small towns with older people, and not just the investment in the infrastructure, but the investment in access to education and resources to be able to utilize. And so this is a small example. And it's, as I said, over the course of 5 days traversing the state, as I scroll through the story map here, you see that in central Maine, I've got Buttercup with our Commissioner of Economic Development, Mike Duguay. You see here now a gathering of 40 different organizations throughout the state that were convening in a digital equity workshop. And it's just helpful to put in perspective the broad array of an ecosystem that exists that is not just helping advance the infrastructure deployment, but truly helping communities prepare for a future of increased connectivity. As we make our way to northern Maine, and for those of you that have been to Aroostook County, you know that, or you may not know, but Aroostook County is Maine's northernmost county. It is the size of Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Connecticut combined, with a population of about 40,000. So it is highly rural, highly agricultural. And as you can imagine, connectivity is a real challenge. And so here, another great example of how multi-organizational collaboration is so important is meeting with the county administrator standing next to me on the far left, Ryan Pelletier. But also I want to highlight this woman, Crystal Tilley, who as a digital navigator traverses the entire county, likely knows everybody, their computer passwords and their phone pins, to be able to provide technical assistance through a series of digital navigation courses offered throughout the county in partnership with libraries and other organizations. She's able to do that because she's coordinating directly with a regional partner who is responsible for helping support communities, not just in their broadband planning, but in their assessment of technical needs at a community level. And so it's these people and these characters that are so critical to the success of our ability to deploy funding and address our connectivity needs, of which I'm happy to talk more about, Gary. But as I think it is really useful to have a perspective of some of the stories and some of the key individuals. And so, as I made my way through the state, again, here we have Fred Corey, who essentially is the catch-all IT specialist for the Micmac Nation with its primary tribal lands in Aroostook County. We have we have 4 separate tribes and bands in Maine. And as we think about tribal connectivity and the unique challenges that tribal lands and tribal residents encounter, having key partners who are thinking about not just current needs, but the future needs of connectivity. Fred is a person who is thinking about how can we build in remote healthcare solutions through technology to be able to address a disparate network of tribal homes and residents throughout the state, and use that in such a way to aggregate data to inform the best level of procurement of services for tribal residents. And so people like Fred are kind of these unsung heroes that are doing the work of how to fuse infrastructure development and investments in digital opportunities. Gary, I'm making my way from Aroostook County into Washington County, which, through Danforth, and this is the Sunrise State. And in the Sunrise State, we've got Sunrise County in Washington County. It is our oldest county, and it is one of our poorest counties. Yet the level of multi-town organization and regional orientation of infrastructure development is pretty inspiring. And so, as you can see, there are a number of significant infrastructure projects that have been invested. This story map provides a link to those projects and those partners. But I just want to at least round out this portion of storytelling with just, one small example to really illustrate I think, the confrontation of the hypothesis that I posed at the beginning. And I just want to highlight the woman in the image here, Janice, and a conversation in Washington County. Her comments were so profound. I wrote them down so that I could share in some of our follow-up conversations. Janice conveyed this to me in a conversation. She said, "I spent 35 years as a school teacher. I'm a mother, I'm a veteran. I learned to thrive in one stream of life, and I'm now forced into another stream through technology. And I feel like I'm swimming in brackish water. And I fear I would drown if not for the shared experience to learn new technology skills with new friends at my local library, and to be able to understand how I can communicate to my children and thrive in their new world." And it's just amazing, the poetry that we encounter on a daily basis. Janice is an assistant town clerk in a very small town in a very rural county in Eastern Maine. And to have that perspective and the proactive intention to learn new skills, especially as the infrastructure is becoming available. Now, we've made great progress in Maine over the last couple of years. As we mentioned in my intro, we facilitated about $250 million in public and private investments to drive our connectivity, our unserved, from 18% to approximately 4% that we are looking to serve through the process. We've trialed a number of different alternative technologies. We emphasize the fiber to the premise strategy first, and we recognize the balance of solving immediate problems with the long-term orientation, and really try to address that through a comprehensive connectivity approach, which, as I just finish up here, it's important to emphasize that manifests in a real way. Got the town of Bremen with a fisherman by Bo Marsh, who's been helping identify that the town fishery and the need to be able to connect that facility with the fishing vessels, ensuring affordable options through a town committee. It's a key part of how Lincoln County is able to address a comprehensive connectivity strategy. Here you see over 24 folks who came together for an evening picnic. And it's now Lincoln County received a regional award in partnership with Consolidated Communications through Video Fiber to be able to be the first county in Maine who will have a comprehensive connectivity solution in place. And so, again, it's a combination of libraries, digital navigators, county administrators, who are working with county jails to be able to ensure that all residents not just have access to technology, but have the technical assistance, and affordability, and access to devices that are needed to be able to thrive. So, Gary, I'm happy to keep walking through our story map here, but I know that there's a number of questions to be had and discussion ahead. But I think it's really far too easy to, our work is all really hard, right? And I'm grateful for the time and space that Fiber Broadband Association provides for technical discussion. But I also think it's really important to keep in perspective the fundamental nature of connectivity that we're looking to address and how it manifests in really specific ways in places like Maine. So thanks for the opportunity to share some of the story here. Our story map is on the website under mainconnectivity.org. Happy to this conversation.
Well, Andrew, thanks for sharing your Buttercup story. I love it. Broadband is about people, And that's what I really love about your story, is really connecting with people. So, we have a number of audience questions here. And, one was, what was the most surprising thing you learned during your trip?
In some ways, surprising but obvious. I think time and time again, I was kind of looking for people to reaffirm my hypothesis, I guess, as one does. And in almost every county I visited, in every conversation, there was the reaffirmed emphasis that, maybe it's possible to have to be consumed by the internet and to lose sight of our human connections. But the most prevalent response was that this is an essential way for us to participate, for me to be involved, for me to be able to pursue the things that I want. And the recognition that we have a lot of work to do to continue adapting that to the rate of evolution of technology. But, again, it's both surprising but obvious, but just how prevalent the demand and need and how strongly people still feel about the fundamental need for access and participation.
I think when I think about fiber critical infrastructure, I think a lot beyond internet. Maine, given your low density and access to water, are you seeing a lot of hyperscaler interest in AI data centers in Maine? Or we looked at last week, we had a webinar where our studies showing that we need 214 million more miles of fiber for support AI data centers.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's two ways of answering that. I think first, understanding the energy demand and dynamic represents an added level of complexity, which I know everyone has to reconcile with. But I would say, from our standpoint, I think that is why the development of MooseNet as a state-owned public asset will be so critical to addressing that growing demand. And we are amidst our design build stage right now, and I'm really excited to share that later in a week or less, we'll be posting an RFP to seek additional partnership for our operations, maintenance, commercialization, and engineering. And so leveraging that infrastructure to address the growing demand, whether it's through our research and education networks, whether it's through our schools and library networks. The Maine school and library network is a national model for building the foundation of digital equity and inclusion through its bulk procurement of services, leveraging E-rate funding, leveraging state regulatory funding through the Public Utilities Commission, and providing an added level of technical assistance and resource development through Network Maine and servicing our network of schools and libraries. And so, as we prepare for a growing AI economy and thinking about the role of data centers, that type of infrastructure is going to be really key to being in place to be able to incentivize and support, whether it's hyperscalers or a distributed network and ecosystem of data centers.
Buttercup reminds me a lot. I do a lot of whitewater kayaking, and I have friends that literally live in vans very much like Buttercup because they are avid whitewater kayakers. But the problem I always have is I have to go find a Dollar General to get online to have any connectivity. And I can imagine, as you throughout Maine, just cell coverage, Wi-Fi, any kind of connectivity is very challenging. Was that your experience? Or?
Gary, are you trying to bait me into a conversation about wireless and cellular? Because you should. I think your point is spot on as to the alignment of connectivity with, we think about them as heritage industries in Maine, right? When you look at farming, forestry, fisheries, and the outdoor economy in Maine, the role of having ubiquitous connectivity, not just through fiber to the premise, but with a comprehensive multi-technology set of options. We've got to be getting out of this space of the binary conversation. Do you have service? Do you not? And so when we look at whether, it's the outdoor economy and recreational opportunities, which are now increasingly dependent upon device access, being able to expand our cellular connectivity and wireless is going to be key to success. And again, that is one more way in which we are hoping to leverage MooseNet, right? I mean, these highly rural, hilly, tree-covered areas are in some ways connectivity deserts for a reason. It is hard and costly to deliver. If we can leverage and subsidize MooseNet to be able to incentivize and expand wireless and cellular service, that's essential. And then, in fact, actually, we're really excited to be working. We just put out an RFP earlier this year, funding through the Northern Border Regional Commission, to be able to engage technical assistance through Tilton and with the local communications partner, Blaze, who just put together the outdoor economy roadmap for the state as well. And so, Gary, I invite you to join me and actually Maine MCA's board chair, Tim Schneider, on a whitewater kayaking trip in April next year on the Passamaquoddy in Hancock County, which is, you might be lucky in that it's still snowing, but there will be whitewater.
Well, I do our best whitewater and snow, so I'll definitely be there, Andrew. Andrew, thanks again. Just really appreciate you and everything your office is doing, and all the state broadband directors. You guys just been doing an amazing job, and hopefully you guys will get some rest after September 4th when you get your final proposals in. I want to thank everybody for joining us today and look forward to getting back together next Wednesday. We're going to have Bill Baker, the CEO of Nextlink, discuss fiber and fixed wireless, a winning combination for Nextlink. So thanks, everyone. So I'm signing off here from Argentina, and I look forward to seeing you guys in Toronto in a couple weeks.